Welcome along to a bonus episode this week as Saints prepare for League Cup action to travel east down the road to the Amex and play Brighton and Hove Albion in the second round of the Carabao Cup, what it is this season. We've barely had enough time to reflect on what was another disappointing day at St Mary's at the weekend, a 2-1 defeat to Leicester City. This episode may not be as long as some previous shows, but do stick with us for our predictions, some important travel advice and top tips on away pubs. I also get the chance to speak to a familiar voice for those of you that do listen to Saints Podcast as we look ahead to Tuesday night's match.
You know, it's the Southampton way, as I say, to feel naturally pessimistic about things. I try to be positive. I think, we have an element of our fan base that continually love to moan about everything and anything. But, I still want to be positive. There's a lot of the season to go. But you look at where we were this time last season, even under Pellegrino, we had 5 points after 3 games. We've got 1 and we've not played any of the real big boys yet. So I think it's, right to be nervous.
I also get the chance to speak to Alan from the Brighton Hove Albion podcast, the Albion Roar. And despite Seagulls losing at Anfield on Saturday night, he remains upbeat about their chances of flying through this Tuesday.
Is Chris taking it seriously? I think so. As an exercise in remaining in the Premier League, I think he's taking it seriously. As an exercise in progressing in the Cup, I'd like to think he would. I mean, we're all paying good money to see this. I mean, it's extra above and beyond an expensive season ticket. So I think at the very least, any given manager would actually have the courtesy of putting out the best side. But we know, just historically, that it's not going to be, the absolute first team.
So stay tuned for the rest of the show. Let us know where you're watching from or where you're listening from. This episode is available to download in the card above my head if you are watching on YouTube, and all the other good platforms are available in the link in the description. Do get involved in the conversation. Leave your comments, your predictions, anything in between in the comments below. So let's get on with the show as we preview our trip to the Amex. So welcome along to our preview part of the show. Saints are in League Cup, Carabao Cup, EFL Cup, Worthington Cup, Littlewoods Cup, but just the League Cup to you and me this Tuesday night as we take the relatively short trip down the coast to our South Coast rivals, Brighton and Hove Albion. So joining me this week to help me look ahead to Tuesday night's match, the first of our collaborations this season, a voice that some of you may already be aware of and may recognise and appeared briefly in our season review in May. I'd like to welcome to the show the host of the Total Saints podcast, Ben Stanfield. Thanks for coming by, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, all good, Freddie. A bit disappointed by the start to the season, but yeah, lovely to come along and finally talk to you and scare a few people with my face.
Hopefully we have a few more of these over this season as well. But it is a quick turnaround for us. With the Tuesday night game coming, we've barely had enough time to reflect on Saturday's match. But I think before we get to Brighton, we'll take this chance to briefly share our thoughts on the Leicester game. So a 2-1 defeat, another last-minute goal to concede. I mean, Claude Puel rubs salt in the wounds once more.
Yeah, it was typical Saints, really, Freddie, wasn't it? We've become, sadly, used to it over the last couple of seasons or so. I was reflecting on it ahead of my podcast and thinking that the Southampton way used to be about the pathway from players coming from the academy to the first team. These days, it seems to be sort of throwing points away from winning positions. I think I saw on the BBC website it was 24 points that we've thrown away since the start of last season, from winning positions. And when you think of how Saints struggle to score goals, you really can't, legislate for that. So same old story. We're not seeing games out, individual mistakes, collective mistakes. The fans are frustrated and, we just don't seem to learn our lessons, do we?
No, not at all. And 24 points, that's almost 2/3 of our entire haul last season.
It would make life a lot easier if we kept hold of them, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. But, 3 games in, we've just been chatting before with recording. We're starting to become worried already.
I think it's only natural, isn't it? I mean, we were very lucky to scrape through last season, and I obviously do the podcast with Adam Leach, as many of you will know, and he made a good point at the start of the season that it's essentially, the same squad and it's the same set of players that Puel had and Pellegrino had, and yes, we've signed 3 or 4 players in the summer, but they're still integrating into the side. So, yeah, I mean, it's the Southampton way, as I say, to feel naturally pessimistic about things. I try to be positive. I think, we have an element of our fan base that continually love to moan about everything and anything. But, I still want to be positive. There's a lot of the season to go, but you look at where we were this time last season, even under Pellegrino, we had 5 points after 3 games. We've got 1, and we've not played any of the real big boys yet. So I think it's right to be nervous.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we don't continue the way that we've been continuing the first 2 games, that we've started slowly and then kind of grow into the game. But maybe we might be going down that path, growing into the season. But more on yesterday's goals, though. Damari Gray with the equaliser. Cedric, he's starting to become a bit of a liability. He basically collides with Elianusi. He doesn't get much on the header away, and it falls nicely for Damari Gray.
One of the other things that we've become accustomed to the last 12 months or so, Freddie, is Cedric being beaten at the back post for a headed goal. So I don't know what he's doing. I mean, he's one of those players that on his day is brilliant, but when he's not on it, he's just all over the place. And again, I mean, what he's doing for that goal, he's just running around in circles, and the header just falls straight to Damari Gray. It's a great finish. But again, typical Saints, you take the lead, you work so hard for 52 minutes, and you throw it away again straight away with just a basic error. And these guys are Premier League professional footballers. I just don't. It frustrates me so much that we just seem to do it week in, week out. We give away soft goals.
It was a real commentary cliche yesterday. You're most vulnerable when you score.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, as you say, absolutely the nail on the head. And we've seen it so many times with Saints, haven't we? It's one of those bugbears. Whenever we take the lead, you feel more nervous. It's incredible. You should feel more satisfied, but there we go.
I don't think there's not enough about us to go for the jugular and kind of kill the game off. But, a red card from Pierre Morhuibier. I have to get the pronunciation right, otherwise we'll have Lucy on our case. But he didn't help our affairs. But from then on, as I sort of just said, we never looked confident to take the result, and eventually we're clinging on to play for the draw.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a psychological thing. I think it has to be. These are players that for some reason it gets into their mind that as soon as they're under pressure, you look at teams like Bournemouth. I think they have the opposite of us. They've won numerous points from a losing position. They did it again at Everton. 2-0 down. They were down to 10 men. They still got back and got a point. For me, it's a psychological thing with Saints. They clearly don't have any leaders, Freddie, and we've spoken about that again. And I know you guys have as well. There's no one on the pitch that sort of grabs them by the scruff of the neck and sort of tries to game manage. And for me, that is the issue. As soon as they come under a bit of pressure, they just fold. And as for Pierre, I mean, I really like him, and I was glad he's back in the team. He's someone that gives 100%. But I have to be honest, I mean, that was embarrassing yesterday. And if that was any other team, I'd be saying the same. It was embarrassing dive. He didn't need to do it. And whether it changed the game, substantially, I don't know, because we were already on the back foot. But yeah, and there's just no need to do it. And it's not the sort of thing that you want to see in the Premier League or any level, really.
No, not at all. And I think that dive is something that Tom Daly would be embarrassed of.
Yeah.
But for most of the game, we looked comfortable on possession. Similar story to previous years, but we're lacking cutting edge up front.
That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, that first 50, 55 minutes, Saints were brilliant. I mean, they played really, really well, and I think we're all agreed it was the best they played for certainly this season, but we just don't stick the ball away when we're on top. And, you always think about the football commentators over the years saying, you have to score when you're on top. We go in at 0-0, having played really well in the first half. And again, that cutting edge, it's been there for the last 12, 18 months, hasn't it? We don't score goals, and yet when we do, we don't hold on to the points. So it's a real challenge now for Mark Hughes to start to sort of work out who he's going to start up front, and then who's going to put the ball away from him in terms of goals. Because Shane Long, I mean, love him or loathe him, I'm probably on the fence. He's someone that clearly gives 100%, but 2 goals in 48 before yesterday, I think you and I could probably score that, Freddie.
Yeah, I think either one of our grandparents could have scored more. But the second goal, a sucker punch, 92nd minute. I mean, we have all our players in our own half defending deep, trying to cling on for that draw, and Maguire's given the time and space of a coach to drift in to take a long range shot, and it's a bit fortuitous, falls through 2 defenders' legs, and McCarthy couldn't do anything about it.
I mean, is there anything more Saints than that, Freddie? I mean, you got a centre-back drilling it in from 35 yards. It goes through 2 sets of legs. Keeper's nowhere to be seen. I mean, 93rd minute, whatever it was. As I say, we all have Saints in our hearts. I think we're all used to seeing that sort of thing happen. But yeah, there's nothing more Southampton than that, really, is there?
Typical of the last 2 years, perhaps. But let's try and look forward then to Tuesday night's match. Last season in the League Cup, as it was last season, a real disappointment and a real sort of baptism of fire for Jan Bednarek on the night. But we were schooled by sort of eventual, promoted Wolves. I mean, surely we must be looking at this competition for a reprieve from some of the league's disappointments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, reflecting on that Wolves game just briefly, I mean, that wasn't their first team by any stretch of the imagination. That was a second/third string side, and they tore us apart. And I mean, it was a disappointing exit. As one of your folks said on your video last night, Freddie, Saints need a win. They need to get a win from somewhere. Will he change it up? Will he sort of think, right, let's focus on Palace and play some of the fringe players? If he does and then they lose, there's going to be a continuation of the negative confidence. So I think it's really hard to tell what Hughes is going to do, whether he's going to set them out to sort of go out with a strong side and say, look, we need to win a game. But absolutely, I think as fans, we want to do well in the league, but everyone wants to have a good cup run. We've actually been quite lucky the last couple of years, haven't we, in terms of getting to Wembley twice. I mean, as a Saints fan of 30 years, I think my first experience of going to Wembley was for the JPT, and yet, we've been lucky to go 3 times in the last sort of 10 years. So, the other thing as well, I mean, it's the only all Premier League fixture in the Carabao Cup round. So Saints couldn't really have asked for a tougher game, being away against Premier League. So it's certainly not going to be an easy game, but you just wonder how Hughes is going to set up now.
Yeah, but interesting to see how Brighton line up as well. I mean, you got to expect some sort of a rotation in both squads. You have to think that the players that weren't involved in Saturday's match, Gabbiadini left out, Yoshida left out. We didn't see a few others that were on the bench, couldn't get on the pitch, but James Ward-Prowse, all you have to say expected to start. And Angus Gunn, I think, is clearly going to be our cup keeper this season.
Yeah, for me, we need competition for places, and the only way that we're going to get that is by people being given a chance to wear the shirt and prove to Hughes that they want to start on a Saturday. You mentioned there, I made sure I did my homework for this, Freddie. So Brighton last season they beat Barnsley and then they lost to Bournemouth. In both of those games, Chris Hughton played pretty much a second string side. So I think we can probably imagine that he's going to give a few players a run out as well. But for me, we need to make sure that there's competition for places for the Premier League, and the only way that we can do that is to play the sort of players you've mentioned. So the likes of Target, Yoshida, JWP, Gabbiadini, those sort of players, they need to be given a chance to get out, particularly Maya Yoshida. He's obviously come back late from the World Cup. Everyone's saying he's not fit to play. Well, the only way he's going to play and get up to fitness is by, getting 90 minutes under his belt. So I think Hughes will probably try and blend it a bit with some players from yesterday. Obviously, Højbjerg will be suspended, so we can use that as his game rather than potentially missing Palace. So I mean, for me, a few of the French players, Angus Gunn exactly, need to be given a chance to get in there and show what they can do, and put a few of the other more senior players under pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got so much competition in almost every single area of the pitch. And I think, as Adam mentioned in last week's podcast, it's an opportunity now for some of the players to regain some confidence. Maybe if Charlie Austin scores, he can go on a bit of a run. Absolutely.
I mean, Ralph Kruger made the point, didn't he, at the Fans Forum about this. We now have 25 players in our squad. And, I think the issue for many of us as fans is, have we now gone for quantity over quality? We used to have a really brilliant starting 11. You'd then have sort of maybe 13, 14 players. We've now got 25 Premier League players that are on Premier League wages. They need to be given game time. But you're right. I mean, Charlie Austin is only going to get his confidence back by scoring goals. He's a natural goal scorer, as Adam and Steve say, if you give him the chances. But again, he's not started the season particularly well. So hopefully the cup game can give them a chance to sort of take the pressure off the Premier League, get out there, enjoy themselves a bit more, express themselves a bit more, knowing that, with all due respect, it's not necessarily the end of the world if they do lose that game. But, hopefully it will mean more positives than negatives.
I hope so. But one final note before we wrap up this part of the show. But the game on Tuesday night, it's one of 4 which games are using video assistant referees, and of course no extra time this season.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, that's good from a fitness point of view. If any of the sort of first 11 do start, they're not going to sort of necessarily be overly tired for the Palace game. In terms of VAR, I mean, I've always generally been a fan of it, Freddie. I think, it's the sort of thing, we've got the technology, let's use it. I mean, we saw a perfect example in the Wolves-Man City game yesterday where the linesman missed a handball that VAR would have picked up. If the technology's there, use it. I think the frustration for many of us is the amount of time it takes, and maybe referees understanding how and when to use it. And, it should always get to the right decision. I think there's still that human element to it that, you need the referee to sort of decide, yes, I was right. No, I need to change my decision. But goal line technology has been fantastic. That's worked to treat. The only way VAR will get better is by trialing it and using it. So I'm all for it. I think as long as it can be built into, the amount of time it takes out of the game.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we actually have any incidents that are being reviewed from the video assistant. So one final note then, give us your score prediction. It could be a tough game down at Brighton.
Yeah, I think Saints will struggle. I think it's, the Amex is a tough ground to go to. I think Chris Hughton's a brilliant manager. I think he gets the best out of his team. So, I'd expect their first 11 to whoever he puts out to give us a tough game. I can't see us winning, Freddie, unfortunately, at the moment. I think we're just in a bad patch. So I'm going to go for 2-1 to Brighton. I'm not liking the sound of that. But before you go, tell everybody where we can find your podcast. Yeah, absolutely. So we're available on quite a few sites now. We're on SoundCloud, we're on Acast. You can find us on iTunes, and we're also on Google Podcasts now. If you just search for Total Saints Podcast, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Total Saints Pod. And as always, you can email us totalsaintspodcast@yahoo.com. So a few ways to get hold of us these days, Freddie.
Great stuff. Thanks, Ben, and we'll speak again soon.
Lovely. Cheers, mate.
So big thanks to Ben from the Total Saints podcast. Remember to check out their show right now. It is available in the description. There's so many great Saints podcasts out there. Remember to check them all out, and I'm sure you'll see a few more of those familiar voices as we go on for the rest of the season. But one thing we didn't quite cover in that conversation with Ben was your important traveller voice for Tuesday night. Now, if you are going by train, be aware the last direct train from Brighton to Southampton Central leaves at 8:30. Now, that is in the first half. It's absolutely outrageous from Southern Fail. They do it again. Otherwise, you are looking at a 3-hour trip via Lewes and Clapham Junction, and then getting home well after 1 o'clock in the morning on a work night. That's absolutely outrageous from those travel companies. But what we are doing, we're actually driving down to Shoreham, grabbing ourselves a free parking space where there are some car parks nearby which are free, and then taking the short train to Farmer to the Amex not long after that. Or alternatively, you can book with our coach travel providers, Southampton Away Travel, where their prices are £19.95, and with 15 available pickup points in the Dorset and Hampshire area, and also Arundel, a bonus one for Tuesday. With complimentary onboard entertainment, 4G Wi-Fi, free food and drink, but do book quickly so you make sure you don't miss out and get home before 12 o'clock midnight. So on to my conversation then with Alan from the Albion Roar podcast. So welcome along to our opposition view part of today's show. Saints travel east to the Amex on Tuesday night for the League Cup action to play Brighton and Hove Albion. So here to tell us more is Alan from the Brighton podcast, the Albion Roar. Thanks for speaking to me once again. How are you doing?
I'm fine, not so bad. I mean, we kind of had an indifferent start to the season. Dreadful at Watford, X against Manchester United. So against Liverpool, got better during the game, still lost. I mean, a 1-0 is actually a sort of a major improvement for us. So, yeah, kind of interesting times.
I mean, League Cup action. Before we get there, you mentioned it briefly there, but a 1-0 defeat at Anfield on Saturday night. A spirited performance, you could say, finishing the game with only sort of 30% possession. I mean, what did you make of it?
Well, the point about it was that we knew that Liverpool, I mean, they ran us ragged last year. They scored 9 goals past us. I think they were probably the one team that actually really did just take us apart. I mean, we contained Manchester City, we contained Chelsea to a large extent. Liverpool just ran us stupid. So I think that was the team that we feared most coming into the second season in the Premier League. So to keep, certainly in the second half, their strikers quiet for the most part, I think is kind of a little bit of an improvement. I mean, I know Liverpool were off the boil a little bit, but, we still got stuck into them, and we played with the same tenacity and high pace that we did against Manchester United, and which did for Manchester United. We know that we've got a long way to go. I mean, it's not as though we're going to do a Leicester City straight away, but if we're going to sort of improve all the time, which is what the club wants to do, just forever looking to go forwards, then these things are going to take their time, and bit by bit, hopefully as the years come along, then we can fear the likes of Liverpool and Manchester City and Manchester United a lot less than sort of us as newbies.
Yeah, there was a bit of ambition in the summer as well, breaking the your transfer record. But Saturday's game, a very organised, very structured Chris Hughton side. I mean, there were a few sort of surprise omissions from the starting 11, with 3 of the most creative players: Pascal Gross, Jurgen Locadia, and wait for it, Alireza Jahanbakhsh. Is that right?
Nearly. Just Ali Jahanbakhsh. Yeah, they're creative guys. I mean, to be fair, Gross hadn't had the best start to the season. I've seen Yoghurt turn quicker. Locadia, I think with the game at Liverpool, it's a containment game. You have to have your strongest, most disciplined side ready for it. And yes, it's great that, we've got these creative players in. And they will probably be, and I know we'll get onto this presently, but I think that they will probably be more likely to be blooded in a game like the League Cup game on Tuesday. Hopefully then we'll get to see what these players are all about, because we know that we've got these tough, disciplined players who will sort of go through a proverbial brick wall for you. But to see these creative players, then it's the likes of the Southampton game, which actually comes at a perfect time ahead of the game against Fulham we have next Saturday.
And the League Cup really serves as a chance for fringe players to get more game time. And historically, in the last few years, you've seen Chris Hughton make up to sort of 11 changes in the starting lineup. Last year, it was a 1-0 win, 11 changes against Barnet, and then going all the way through to extra time. Do you think we're going to see more changes on Tuesday?
I think we'll see a few changes. I think that there might be, because last season it was against Barnet, and you'll get a chance to blood the under-23s. I think that if you did that against Southampton, obviously a fellow Premier League side, I think that they'll be turned over. I mean, our attitude from this end is that Southampton obviously got an excellent conveyor belt of talent that's come through the club over the past few years, and therefore we're fully expecting that whoever's coming through next will also be of good quality. And if Mark Hughes wants to do that and get these next few players in, then compared to what Southampton have, compared to what we have, then the Southampton sort of conveyor belt will be that bit better. So I suspect that Chris Hughton will therefore bring in the fringe first team players rather than the fringe under-23 players.
Is it anyone's guess who could be in the starting 11? I mean, how do you think Chris Hughton will approach this game? Like you say, it is the only sort of all Premier League tie in this competition, in this round. How do you think he'll approach it?
I think he'll do it pragmatically. He always does. I think there is an opportunity, especially as a home game, to progress. I mean, that's as far from saying Southampton or pushover. Of course not. It also does depend on how Southampton approach the game as well. I suspect it will have things like a change of goalkeeper. I think that the defensive options are a little bit limited. I think that possibly the midfield options are a little bit limited. I would guess about probably 5 or 6 changes, of which, as you pointed out, I think that, they'll be a little bit more creative rather than sort of sometimes stultifying but absolutely necessary sort of defensive block that he hasn't been known to put up.
And do you think he'll be seeking progression in this year's competition? The last few years, he's sort of sacked it off with a half-assed attempt at playing, the fringe players, the younger players, and this season, of course, there's no extra time to consider.
I think that because of the limitations of the Cup, then I think that, and the limitations that possibly some of the quote fringe players, even though their record signings are going to get, then this is the sort of thing where, Chris will actually blood those players. Like I say, I suspect we'll see Jack and Baksha. I suspect we'll see Basuma again. I suspect we'll see all the new Locadia might well play as well. Is Chris taking it seriously? I think so. As an exercise in remaining in the Premier League, I think he's taking it seriously. As an exercise in progressing in the Cup, I'd like to think he would. I mean, we're all paying good money to see this. I mean, it's extra above and beyond an expensive season ticket. So I think at the very least, any given manager would actually have the courtesy of putting out the best side. But we know, just historically, that it's not going to be, the absolute first team until you get to the later stages anyway.
Yeah, that's what we've done over the last few years and managed to find ourselves in the Cup final 2 seasons ago. But you mentioned about sort of above and beyond the ticket price and Tuesday night's game, very reasonable price, it's £12 a ticket. But before we get to your prediction, tell us some top tips and away pubs. There's going to be some difficulty the Saints fans getting back after the game.
Yeah, we got the same probably issue. I think we're playing you guys next month down at St Mary's, and it's a Monday night, and we know we've got to leg it back, for the last train. If you're going to do this, I suspect that probably you're going to have the same issues. This is Southern Rail; anything can happen. You might have to drive the train yourself. So I would suggest that if you're going to come in earlier, you'd be more than welcome. There's a lot of the best pubs are around Brighton Station. I mean, if you're going to come in on the train, get off at Brighton Station. You have to anyway to change to get to Falmer. The pubs around there, some are home pubs, but there are a fair amount that offer. The away fans are more than welcome, and I'm thinking the likes of the Grand Central, the Evening Star, the Battle of Trafalgar, the Nelson. They all seem to be sort of fairly welcoming.
Excellent stuff. So to wrap up this part, then, give us your prediction.
Oh, I love predictions. Don't they always work well? just because I feel that we have a better backup squad, I'm going to go for a sneaky 2-1 win for Brighton.
Well, Ben, earlier on in the show, he said a 2-1 to Brighton as well. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen. It's anyone's guess. And just before you go, just tell everybody where we can find you.
You can find us, the Albion Roar. We're on Radio Reverb, 97.2 FM in the city of Brighton Hove, online, radioreverb.com. And there's always our podcast, which you can pick up on Audio Boom. Look for the Albion Roar channel.
Excellent stuff. And we'll see you again soon, Alan.
All the best.
So a big thanks to Alan from the Albion Roar podcast for coming over this week. Remember to check out all of their channels in the links in the description for all of your Brighton needs. But that does pretty much bring full time to this week's bonus show. Remember to leave your comments below. Join the conversation on anything you have, any thoughts, predictions, lineups, anything you want to add to the conversation for Tuesday night's game. Do remember to check out and come back later on this week for our regular show as we look forward to a trip to Selhurst Park and Crystal Palace, and hopefully on the back of a win from the League Cup on Tuesday night. So a big thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe, and come on, you Saints.